Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this past week was filled with news about the upcoming iPhone 14. We're also expecting the March Apple invites to be very soon, as well as many different releases with iOS 15.4. So we'll talk about all of that, and this is your news update for the week of February 27th, 2022. And the first thing is, Apple is still leading the global smartphone sales for 2021 and into 2022. Apple made $448 billion according to Counterpoint, which actually monitors these sorts of things and who's actually making the most amount of money around the world. So Apple is still leading. This goes back and forth often between Samsung and Apple, but it looks like they're still in the lead with that. If you use Apple News and you're in Canada, I mentioned this in my follow-up video the other day, but if you use Apple News and you're in Canada and you maybe have a News Plus subscription, you can get local news starting in two different cities, Toronto and Montreal. So that's available, and Renee Ritchie originally posted that, and it looks like it's available in those cities now. Apple will soon be able to replace the Face ID sensor without replacing your entire display. This is thanks to new modules that actually incorporate everything from Face ID to the front cameras and more. So all of the different sensors that you need in here, Apple apparently can now flip up the display or move it to the side depending on how it's actually connected, and then replace just the module itself that lies behind the notch. So they'll be able to do that without replacing your display every time, which in turn saves the turnaround time and everything else. So they'll replace that gasket, make it water resistant again, and then you'll be good to go. So it looks like they're actually able to do that now, or it will be very, very soon. This past Thursday marked Steve Jobs' 67th birthday, and it's hard to believe he's been gone so long, and I always wonder what he would think of the current version of Apple under Tim Cook. Whether he would like the colors that are used for iOS, the ways things interact. I'm always curious to wonder, since he was extremely picky but also very thorough, I'm curious what he would think about the current state of it. What do you think about that? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Now, for a long time, many people have wanted Instagram on iPad. I know I do, since I use my iPad oftentimes when I'm not recording videos or editing. I'll use my iPad with a larger display instead of my iPhone. Unfortunately, there's just no Instagram app, so it looks very awkward. You can run the iOS app, and according to the head of Instagram, they said it's because of lack of interest. I don't know that I take this as fact, because many people I know would love to have Instagram on their device. So on any device, whether that be Mac or iPad or any Android device or any Android tablet, I think they should make it available everywhere. But unfortunately, it looks like it's something that they're putting on the back burner and maybe will do one day. Also, Facebook continues to say that app tracking transparency is harmful and making it more expensive for businesses who are trying to reach customers. This is something that was added a while ago with different versions of iOS 15, and it's found under privacy, tracking, and app tracking transparency. Apps can no longer talk to one another easily, and thanks to this, it's saved a lot of different information being shared across apps that I wouldn't necessarily want shared. So that's something that they've actually turned on, and it's causing a lot of harm. In previous updates, I've talked about Facebook saying it's going to cost them $10 billion. Google is apparently going to implement this very soon as well, but maybe in a different way. So it's great to see that Apple's app tracking transparency is actually working the way it was intended. This past week, Apple released iOS 15.4 Beta 4 along with its iPadOS, tvOS, HomePodOS counterparts, watchOS 8.5 Beta 4, and macOS 12.3 Beta 4. All of those are available to developers and public beta testers. But one thing I didn't mention is HomePodOS 15.4 Beta 4 apparently includes support for Dutch voice recognition, or Dutch Siri voice recognition. So when that update's released to the public and you have a HomePod Mini or a HomePod, you'll be able to use that with your HomePod. So that's a great addition. Hopefully they add more languages in the future. And for those of you wondering about iOS 15.4 and when to expect its release to the public, well, this week I would expect iOS 15.4 RC, or release candidate. That would be the final version released to the public, but released to developers and public beta testers usually about a week early. So the RC means as long as there's no additional issues, they'll release it to the public with the exact same version. And I would expect that as soon as tomorrow, March 1st. So we typically can expect that, and then we expect it maybe a public release around March 8th. That's when it's said that we're going to have that Apple event. And if we do have that Apple event, it looks like we should have invites as well as soon as tomorrow. So those Apple invites for that event, it's supposed to be a virtual event, should be going out as soon as tomorrow. And at that event, for those of you curious about what we might see, if you haven't heard this already, we do expect a new iPhone SE third generation or 3 that incorporates 5G but looks very similar to the second generation that I have here. We also expect an iPad Air 5th generation, basically the same thing as this iPad Air 4th generation, with maybe some upgraded cameras, updated internals, and then hopefully center stage on the FaceTime camera. So that's something that's really helpful. It keeps you in the frame. And then, of course, we do expect updates to MacBook as well. I've shown some of this in different videos, but we expect the MacBook Pro to get a slight update. With the MacBook Pro, we don't expect a redesign with it, and maybe we'll even keep the touch bar. That seems to be a mixed report, so maybe we'll see one, maybe we won't, but we don't expect a different form factor, just upgraded internals from the M1 to possibly the M2 chipset. However, we do expect new MacBook Airs, meaning there'll be a new design with different colors that match the new iMac, as well as a Mac Mini redesign, whether that be smaller or just upgraded internals to maybe an M1 Pro or M1 Max. All of those things are expected. Hopefully there'll be a few different surprises as well. When it comes to iPhone 14, there's some new information as to what the new replacement for the notch looks like. Instead, we're supposed to have a sort of cutout that looks like a pill and then maybe a hole punch next to that. New schematics, first shown on Weibo and then later posted by John Prosser, show what the actual size of the new pill and hole punch display would look like. So it looks like it could be much larger than we originally anticipated. Ross Young had shown some of this before, but we didn't get a sense of what it looked like, and definitely appears much larger. Apple is also now transitioning away from Samsung to TSMC for its new 5G chips in 2022 on iPhone 14 models. The chips are smaller and in turn should be more power efficient as well, as they're built on a smaller nanometer process. So that's something we could see in 2022, and Apple is now working with multiple manufacturers to make their own version of a 5G chip, maybe a little bit later in 2023 with iPhone 15. This again could have power advantages and better integration with devices, since Apple would control the chip directly. So we went from Intel to Qualcomm. Maybe we'll go back to Apple soon, which might be Intel based, but we don't really know. I would expect it to be better. Apple makes incredible chips, and typically they're much more efficient as far as power is concerned. So that could be a big win for 5G on iPhones. Now, the Apple Watch is expected to get some major updates with the next generation, but more specifically with software. Mark Gurman this past week said that we do expect Apple Watch to get an update this year with a Series 8 Apple Watch, a new SE, and a new ruggedized version, but he's also saying don't expect any new sensors just yet. But he does expect faster chips and the largest update to software since the initial launch of the Apple Watch. So maybe we'll see a full redesign of watchOS with the next version of watchOS at WWDC, or maybe we'll just see some slight changes. But if it's supposed to be the largest update ever, hopefully we'll see something different with new health tracking abilities and more. So that seems to be something they could be focused on. And if they're updating watchOS that large, hopefully we'll see the same with iOS. However, there hasn't been any information about that just yet. So iOS 16 is expected to have some major changes, but we don't really know exactly what they are yet, as there's been very little information about it. According to a new patent that Apple has filed, it looks like Apple is considering a computer that's fully built into the keyboard, similar to what we had years ago with, say, a Commodore 64. So we could have just the Magic Keyboard or a new version of it that might be a little bit thicker, but incorporate an M chipset, maybe an M1 or M2, and just have an HDMI port out along with a Thunderbolt, and then you'd be able to connect everything through peripherals that way into a monitor or something like that. It makes a lot of sense since the M1 and M2 chipsets probably don't have very intense thermals. We're able to get that sort of thinness in a MacBook Air, so it makes sense you could put it in a keyboard, but maybe we would just have a keyboard to an all-new Apple display, and that's it. Maybe a couple different peripherals connected to the keyboard itself. That'd be something we haven't seen in a very long time, and whether or not it ever comes to market is hard to say, but at least Apple's considering different sorts of form factors we haven't seen for a very long time. And speaking of new form factors, Apple is apparently working on a foldable MacBook, meaning the display would fold as well, and the largest size is said to be around 20 inches. So it would get rid of a physical keyboard in favor of a virtual keyboard like we have on an iPad or iPhone, and also have a virtual trackpad. So we could have something like this. Of course, it's just an idea, and Apple works on all sorts of ideas, so we may never see it, but it looks to be something they're actually working on instead of maybe a foldable iPhone. Or maybe they're working on a whole set of foldable devices. We just just don't know, but I'm curious what you would think about a virtual keyboard. I would be okay with it, but I think a lot of people would really miss that tactile feel, so I'm not so sure it'd be a great idea, but of course I'd have to try it if they actually release it. Apple is still working on that AR or VR headset. Not Apple Glass, that's something different, but they're working on a headset that is now said to feature micro LED displays for the eyepieces. This would be the first time we've seen micro LED in an Apple device or many other devices, and what it is a replacement for OLED. So instead of using OLED, it would use micro LEDs to light up individual pixels, which would lead to power efficiency and more. So it could go very bright, but also be high resolution and more. So we'll have to wait and see, but it does look like it's set to start production in August or September, meaning we could see it by the end of this year or maybe early 2023. And then finally, Apple Car is still in the works, but Apple has ordered new chips it's designed for its own version of autopilot. So Tesla cars and many others now have their own sort of assisted driving systems. Apple is said to be working on that first and ordered some chipsets to help with that. So it looks like it's in the works, but if they are going to make a vehicle of some sort, it could be years down the road, as that takes a very long time, not to mention the factory and tooling you need to actually ramp up production. So maybe we'll see one by 2030. It's hard to say. There's no specific dates, but Apple's still working on that sort of thing. And so that's everything this past week. Of course, I'm looking forward to iOS 15.4 releasing to the public very soon as next week, and that March Apple event and more, finally getting an Apple event in 2022. Let me know what you're most excited for in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.